What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the top 3 best Huntress builds in Path of Exile 2 0.4. So in this guide I will give you a quick overview of each setup, then I will explain what skill gems and upgrades should you focus on, then as well we'll see the best gear and how to get it, and then finally we will go over the passive skill tree, the stats, your skill rotations, and even what Atlas passive should you use, so we would be able to get the highest damage possible and much more. And remember, if you want to be up to date, so check any of these builds, look up the best items, the skill trees and powder building, then check my links in the description. And quickly before we continue, if you ever played Path of Exile 2, then you know that the grind for currency can feel endless, and that's where today's sponsor comes in. Elixir.gg is an American-based platform built by actual POE players, and it shows. The website is clean, the UI is simple, the checkout is straightforward, and delivery is extremely fast. They support all popular payment options and offer 24/7 customer service, so there's always someone there if you need help. So what are you waiting for? If you want to skip the grind and enjoy POE2 your way, then click my link in the description and use my code KADE for 15% off your first purchase. This is a high mobility, crit scaling, energy shield based lightning build that excels at mapping, it feels incredible while leveling, and also scales extremely well into the endgame bosses, without needing mandatory uniques or awkward mechanics. This update quietly did a lot of heavy lifting for the spear builds. Projectile scaling got cleaner, lightning damage gained better access to penetration and consistency, and Amazon as an ascendancy is one of the most flexible ones in the game, so when you combine that with the lightning spear mechanical strength, like long reach, the high base damage, very strong crit scaling and excellent projectile interactions, and then you get a build that feels powerful at every stage of progression. This is not a gimmick build, it doesn't rely on snapshotting temporary buffs or hard to execute rotations. We just throw the spear, enemies explode and you keep moving. The playstyle is fast, aggressive and extremely rewarding, especially thanks to the Wind Dancer, energy shield sustain, and the sheer range advantage that the lightning spear will provide us. Another massive win here is the accessibility. While I will show you an optimized endgame setup that is featuring the Akuyana Spear and the Headhunter, but I want to make one thing clear. This build functions perfectly well on the rares, and you can scale it step by step without hitting hard progression walls. This makes it a fantastic league starter, a strong second character, or even a long-term main if you enjoy the fast projectile gameplay. So let's start with the skill gems, and the core of this entire build is the Lightning Spear. This is your primary damage skill, your clear tool and your boss killer all in one. The lightning spear benefits heavily from projectile scaling, the crit chance and the lightning penetration, all of which are extremely accessible in this update. This skill will now feel fantastic, because it has both the reach and the punch, so enemies die before they ever get close, and bosses will melt once your crit engine will come online. For additional damage stacking, we support Lightning Spear with the Barrage, which allows us to focus multiple spear hits onto priority targets. This turns the Lightning Spear from a great mapper into a legitimate boss shredder, without changing our playstyle. Then the Stormlance will play a secondary role, by providing supplemental lightning damage and helping to smooth out the early to mid-game changes before the crit scaling will fully ramp up. We also run the Spear Throw and Explosive Spear as situational tools. The Spear Throw will give you flexibility and the reach in awkward layouts, while Explosive Spear will add burst damage and help with tanky rears or clustered enemies. Then for auras and debuffs, the purity of lightning is incredibly important. It boosts survivability by pushing your lightning resistance comfortably to the cap, and it synergizes extremely well with our energy shield stacking. Alongside that, the Herald of Thunder will add both the damage and the clear speed by chaining crazy lightning through the packs. Then we use Blasphemy to automate the curse application by letting you stay aggressive without stopping to cast manually. This keeps the gameplay smooth and uninterrupted, which is very critical for a fast Amazon build. And then lastly, on mobility and defensive side, the Wind Dancer is the cornerstone. It significantly reduces incoming damage while we're moving, which we're basically doing all the times, and it pairs perfectly with our evasion and energy shield stacks. And then the raw mount will give you a burst movement and repositioning power by letting us fly through the maps and disengage instantly if the things get too dangerous. Next up, moving on to the passive tree, and the psychology here is simple but extremely effective. We scale lightning damage, then scale crit, and then scale energy shield, and from here just multiply everything through the penetration and projectile efficiency. If you look at the tree on the screen, you will notice that we path aggressively through the projectile damage, critical strike chance, and the lightning specific nodes early. These give you immediate power spikes while leveling, and ensure that the build never feels weak or sluggish. Then energy shield is the backbone of our defenses. We prioritize maximum energy shield regeneration and recovery, which all allow you to stay in the combat far longer than a typical projectile build. This is especially important in this update, where sustained damage and survivability will matter much more than the raw burst alone. Then accuracy is another key investment, because we are crit based and attack based, so missing attacks will feel terrible. So using this specific tree combined with the gear will ensure that we are consistently hitting the targets, which stabilizes both our damage and the leech-like sustain mechanics. Then also we pick up the Wind Dancer synergy, so things like evasion scaling and defensive efficiency that smooth incoming damage rather than just trying to brute force tank everything. Overall, the result is a character that feels slippery, responsive, and surprisingly durable despite playing at range. This is a fast-paced, high-mobility mapper that turns the Amazon into a true zooming monster, while still retaining the damage and control needed to comfortably kill any tier 4 pinnacle boss in the game. The core identity of this build is speed, freeze control, and stack projectile damage that scale incredibly hard once you transition into the endgame version. This is not a campaign iShot build. The entire concept is built around the efficiency and result, so I recommend to level with grenades all the way into the early raid maps, and then perform a full respec at level 85 to 88 into the iShot. This respec will cost roughly 400 to 500k gold, which is extremely easy to acquire just by vendoring rares and uniques that you naturally pick up while mapping. Once the swap is done, then the build will completely transform. The movement speed will skyrocket, the clear will become effortless, and the gameplay will shift into a fast and aggressive loop, where enemies are frozen, shattered, and erased before they can even meaningfully interact with you. The iShot scales exceptionally well with the cold and lightning damage, crit, and projectile interactions, which allows this build to feel powerful even without the mandatory uniques. You can also play this build on rares, but it also synergizes insanely well with the chase items like the Headhunter later on, that turns the maps into pure chaos. Despite the speed-focused playstyle, this build is far from fragile. Between the Mystic Harvest, the strong leech, the freeze uptime, and the constant recovery, our survivability is one of the strongest hidden advantages that we got. So let's start with the skill gems, because this build's gameplay is defined by how its skills interact with movement, the freeze buildup, and the burst windows. iShot is your main damage skill and the backbone of the build. It provides consistent cold damage, strong freeze buildup, and excellent clears thanks to projectile scaling and the shattered interactions. When paired with a Herald of Ice, the packs will simply explode as soon as the first enemy freezes and dies, which keeps continuing chaining and chaining across the screens without slowing down. Then Tornado Shot is used as a bonus clearing and a setup tool, especially for rares or the awkward pack formations. It adds additional projectile coverage and helps to stack damage before the iShot finishes the job. Then Barrage is your main single target DPS tool, used primarily during boss fights once the enemy is frozen or heavily debuffed. Then Snipe will act as your impact finisher, requiring some practice but offering massive bursts when used during the proper damage windows. Then Stormcaller Arrow plays a critical role in bossing and must be assigned to a weapon set 2 only. This is extremely important. The Stormcaller is used to purely apply shock, which massively increases the damage taken by the bosses before you commit fully to the freeze and the burst rotation. Then Sniper's Mark is used to generate frenzy charges and amplify the single target damage, which ensures that you always enter boss fights with momentum. Then Wind Dancer will add defensive value and mobility flow, while the Royal Mount will define how this build moves through the maps. You're not walking through the content, but we're flying across it. Raw Mount allows you to reposition instantly, kite dangerous enemies, and maintain tempo without breaking your attack rhythm. And then finally, the Herald of Ice will tie everything together by turning freeze into explosions and making the maps feel insanely satisfying. Next up, moving on to the passive tree, and this is where the iShot Amazon truly comes online. The tree that you can see on the screen is built around projectile damage, critical strike scaling, elemental damage, accuracy, and life, with just enough defenses to feel comfortable while maintaining extreme speed. Accuracy is not optional on this build. You must hit enemies constantly to sustain damage, freeze, and recovery, so investing into the accuracy on the tree and the gear is mandatory. Then on top of it, the cold and lightning damage scaling are also prioritized heavily, by allowing the Ice Shot and the Stormcaller Arrow to work together seamlessly. Then critical strike chance and critical bonuses will amplify both the clear and bonus damage, especially once Barrage and the Snipe will enter the rotation. Then life nodes are taken efficiently and not excessively, because the build relies more on recovery, freeze control and movement rather than the raw tankiness. And then projectile and bow damage clusters will form the backbone of the tree, while utility nodes will help to smooth gameplay, improve movement speed and enhance recovery. This is not a defensive juggernaut tree and it doesn't have to be one. Enemies are usually frozen, shocked or dead before they even reach you, and the Mystic Harvest will later fill in the gaps where traditional defenses would normally be required. This crossbow build exists almost entirely because of the Rampant Raptor that interacts with the ammunition-based crossbow skills in a way that lets you do things that you were absolutely never meant to do, and Hailstorm rounds just happen to be the biggest AoV DPS skill that can utilize this to the max. The core fantasy here is simple but completely unhinged. We are firing Hailstorm rounds over and over again without actually consuming your ammo in a normal way, which floods the screen with an insane number of projectiles while abusing reload behavior that happens in the background. Every single press will send out dozens of projectiles, the screen will get completely carpeted in icy explosions, and bosses will get shredded by overlapping hits that feel way stronger than they should actually be. This is not a smooth, polished and beginner-friendly build, however it's an endgame setup that you play because you enjoy mechanical abuse and squeezing insane value out of a level 1 weapon that was never intended to scale like this. It's clunky at times, it can punish mistakes, and if you mess up your rotation at the wrong moment then your damage falls off. But when it works extremely well, and the amount of power you get out of the Rampant Raptor alone is genuinely shocking. So let's take a look at the specifics, and first we have our skill gems. The main skill and the entire reason that this build exists is the Hailstorm rounds. This is your primary damage source, your clear and your single target all wrapped into one extremely complicated skill. The Hailstorm rounds will fire a massive number of projectiles in expanding area, starting from the center and spreading outward. These projectiles fall over time rather than all at once, which becomes very important later when we talk about projectile speed and the hit frequency. Then permafrost bolts are here for one reason and one reason only. They are your reload enabler. This is the one ammunition explosive skill that you put on your bar, fire once and reload in order to enable the Rampant Raptor interaction. You need to be disciplined with this skill, so you fire it and then just wait to reload to fully complete, and only then you begin spamming the Hailstorm rounds. Just remember, if you rush this or if you cancel the animation accidentally, then the entire loop can collapse. Then Frost Bomb is used as a bonus damage and utility. It helps with exposure, adds burst to the bosses, and fits naturally in the cold base damage profile of the build. It's not the star of the show, but it contributes meaningfully, especially in tougher encounters where you need a bit more punch. Then Blasphemy is used to apply your curse automatically. This build already asks a lot of you mechanically, so automating the curse effects is mandatory. You don't want to be thinking about manual curses when you're already juggling reload timing and projectile spam. Then Herald of Ash is here primarily for the added damage and the clear smoothness. Even though we're heavily invested into the cold and elemental scaling, the Herald of Ash still provides meaningful benefits, especially when combined with how we're hitting the enemies. It helps packs evaporate faster and make mapping feel much smoother overall. And then the crossbow shot exists mostly as utility and a fallback option. You're not building around it, but it gives you something to do if everything goes wrong and your ammo rotation falls off. Next up we have the passive tree, which for this build is doing a lot of heavy lifting, and most of it is focused on enabling the Rampant Raptor, rather than directly scaling the Hailstorm rounds in a traditional sense. One of the biggest priorities of the tree is the attack speed, but this comes with a huge caveat. You cannot mindlessly stack attack speed without a consequence. As your attack speed goes up, your mana cost will skyrocket, and the Hailstorm rounds already has an extremely high mana cost at a higher gem level, so because of that we take just enough attack speed to feel good without completely breaking our sustain. We also want to heavily invest into the projectile modifiers, elemental damage and generic increases to apply all to the flat damage that we're stacking from the gear. The flat damage is king in this build, and the tree is designed to amplify that flat damage as much as possible. Then mana sustain is another major focus. We take increased mana leech nodes and anything else that helps to smooth out the insane mana chain that comes from spamming the Hailstorm rounds. Without these investments, this build will simply not function. And then defensively, the tree is relatively light, and that's intentional. We are relying on gear and the flask interactions to carry a lot of defensive burden. We still pick up energy shield where it's efficient, and we grab quality of life nodes that make the build feel less punishing. But this is not a tanky character by default. This is a one-button build that looks insane on the screen, feels incredible to play, and got a very real damage buff going into 0.4 thanks to the changes how the Nova projectiles function. This is an attack-based movement build that blurs the line between the clear speed and single target. You're constantly moving, constantly generating charges, and constantly detonating the screen with the falling thunder. The entire build revolves around using the whirling slash as both your movement tool and the engine. You generate power charges simply by moving through the enemies, and then consume those charges with the falling thunder to create massive nova explosions that clear the entire packs instantly. The visuals are honestly a huge part of why this build feels so good. The slams will feel heavy, the lightning novas will fill the screen, the terrain DPS will bounce everywhere, and everything will just evaporate around us. It's one of those builds where the gameplay feels natural instead of forced. You're not setting up combos, you're not managing 5 different cooldowns, you're just moving, slamming, and watching enemies die. So let's start with the skill gems. At the core of this setup is the Falling Thunder. Falling Thunder is designed as a single target skill that scales incredibly hard when consuming power charges. On its own, it's already strong, but once you introduce the Nova projectiles, it turns into a full screen clearing monster. With proper charge generation, the Falling Thunder can fire up to 21 projectiles in a full circle around you, all piercing and all capable of chaining off terrain and doing insane amount of DPS. Then Whirling Slash is the real engine of the build. This skill does not exist to deal damage, it exists to hit as many times as possible, as fast as possible and while moving. Every hit is a chance to crit, and every crit is a chance to generate the power charges. We are not standing still while attacking, we are moving through the enemies, generating everything you need passively. And this is why the build feels like a one-button setup, even though technically we're using 2 skills. Then next, the Herald of Thunder will play a massive role in smoothing out the power charge generation. It provides additional hits, additional crit chances, and will help to keep the engine running, even when the enemy pack density dips. This becomes especially important in awkward map layouts, or when transitioning between the packs. Then Infernal Cry is optional, but extremely powerful in early and mid investment. It provides a huge chunk of extra damage as fire, and while it's not mandatory to press consistently, it can dramatically boost the burst when you need it, and later on you can drop it if you want a cleaner one-button experience. And then on defensive side, the Ghost Dance and Wind Dancer are both mandatory. Ghost Dance provides recovery and mitigation through the Ghost Shrouds, while the Wind Dancer will add additional avoidance and synergize extremely well with how often you're moving and getting hit. And then Charge Regulation and the Combat Frenzy will come in once you have the spirit to support them. These simply will provide additional crit chance, charge generation smoothing, and the movement speed. Next up, moving on to the passive tree. And this entire tree exists just to support the charge generation, crit scaling, and defensive stacking. We aggressively path into the critical strike chance and the critical damage early, because these crits are the lifeblood of the build. If you're not critting, you're not generating power charges, and if you're not generating the power charges, then the Falling Thunder does nothing. This is why you should not transition into the build too early. You simply won't have enough passive points to support it until the later levels. We also heavily invest into the evasion and deflection. These 2 mechanics will roll independently, which means even if you fail an evasion roll, you will still get a chance to deflect. When you deflect, you will take significantly reduced damage, and with additional deflection scaling on the tree, this reduction will become extremely powerful. Then skill effect duration is deceptively important here as well. It helps to smooth out the Ghost Dance uptime, Wind Dancer's interaction, and even the overall loop stability. The build will feel much worse without it, even though it's not immediately obvious why. And then Javel sockets are also a priority, so get crit chance, crit damage, attack speed, and defensive stats will all scale extremely well. And as we know, a few well-rolled Javels can fix problems that would otherwise require major gear upgrades.